been a while since the US has adopted CECL, and there have been changes, and certainly there will be upcoming changes. And I think we've encountered a lot of different clients, some who have implemented a system for CECL that has been able to do the job, but maybe not much more. And then others who were able to create a bit more of a flexible system. What kind of have you seen in regards to those who have systems that are a bit more flexible? What has made it successful? What are some of those aspects?
There is no doubt in my mind that the ones that have fared the best and feel the happiest about their systems are those that have had an agenda and a list of requirements that go beyond the regulation itself. That the ones that chose the system because it's going to feed and cover some of their business needs, in addition to fulfilling regulation. We know that again and again, it doesn't matter what kind of regulation it is, but regulation is often the driver or the impetus for putting in a system. But we also know that the ones that fare the best are the ones that don't do it for that reason alone, but actually take into account that regulation in many ways is a byproduct of a business process, and the business process is the one that is at the center of this. So I want to say those are the ones that have been more successful. I've also seen the ones that came to it with something that they wanted to have, of course, done fast, implemented fast, and within budget. But then afterwards, discover that there are so much more that they would like the system to do, and if they have chosen well, they have gotten a system, an application that will let them do that. So I know up to any kind of deadline that there is this rush to just get it put into place, and sometimes can lose sight of making your system flexible and future-proof it enough to make changes to it down the line. That's not what's at the forefront right when you're implementing it. But if you've chosen well, you've chosen a system that will grow with you, and to your point, that will also adapt to changing regulation and changing business needs.
Sometimes there can be certain expectations that come to fruition with regulations, but then other times regulations come out and they're not necessarily exactly what is expected. And so we can implement certain changes, but or we can expect certain changes, but until those regulations are out and we know what is expected, there's not a way to predict exactly how a system will need to be flexible. A CECL system would really ideally function is in a modularized way, right? So from a few different standpoints, one for efficiency, just in terms of whether you're in the middle of the cycle and something goes wrong, being able to more easily trace what's wrong if something comes up, but then also being able to output numbers that are a part of the CECL process, but also maybe could be leveraged for another process. Depending on the size of the institution, right? There are a lot of different analytics processes, and having a system that can help you do what you do best is ideal. And I think we've seen a lot of different clients that, at least for those who have systems that they're happy with, that they've been able to build off of from CECL, they can leverage that system for multiple parts of their risk management process. So different metrics, different analytics. And so especially being able to pull off different numbers for different metrics, not having to wait until the whole the whole process is completed. I think that's a key aspect as well to think about.
That also raises another point, which is the point of that there's so many different points, both from a business process perspective and from also from a regulation perspective, that there's so many aspects to it that being able to put something like that on a single platform has turned out to be very important, exactly for the reason that you're saying, that you will have a better management of your sources of both your models, whether they be standardized models, external models, or your own models, having every kind of model on the same platform, having if not one source of data, then have all of your different data sources flow into one place, and keep it all under one roof. So no aspect of this or no part of regulation or business process lives in isolation anymore. It's a way to, like any kind of new system has a cost of implementation and some sort of sunk cost to put it in place. And if it can only do one thing and it can only do one thing in isolation, there's not great leverage out of the investment that you put into it. So having a flexible platform that will host many different kinds of models, many different kinds of data sources in one place. And on top of that, it gives you a common reference point. And one thing that we're seeing, which the CECL accounting standards are a great example of, but we also see in other pieces of financial institution regulation, is this ever increasing need for and requirement for transparency and traceability and accountability, even high up in the organization. So having a platform that will give you transparency and a common reference point for everything that you do is just going to make that so much easier.
Particularly because sometimes it's not just a quantitative input or output that you need, you also need qualitative parts as well. And so being able to have a system that can integrate both is really important, and not just for the system, but also from the business perspective as well, and for regulators, but also for internal stakeholders, right? We can think about the external, but when we're talking about a system that's dynamic and flexible, being able to have a system that can satisfy the needs and requests of both internal and external requests, that's really, being able to have both quantitative and qualitative, that's also, I think, a really important point.
Absolutely, absolutely. So getting a little bit more specific, like this multi-purpose aspect of a good and solid system kind of pertains to like all aspects of the process that you're going through, right from the beginning, with the data sources that, like, no one has one data source. And I think that part of what has maybe been hidden with the CECL exercise is that that there is a data exercise that goes before you even hit your system, and that can sometimes be cumbersome and a big effort to actually get to the point where you can feed it in. So you definitely want something that's flexible in terms of being able to host many different sources of data onto the same platform and get that in. And we have seen clients that got a little bit toppled over in the process of collecting all of those different sources. It's a huge effort can be a huge effort to do that. Notwithstanding the case where data is just not available. It's a different case. But there's also some of these standardized solutions that require a lot of historic data volumes coming into the system in form of historical data to use in the modeling, and that can get overwhelming and take a long time. And the data exercise is sometimes forgotten in the whole, because there's just 100% focus on the functionality and the calculations and how you do the forecasting in here, and less focus on the effort that goes into putting data into the system.
You've already touched on it a bit. So, we've talked about those who have implemented a CECL system that is more flexible, and they've been able to get more out of. So for those who have struggled a little bit more, especially when we're talking about a system, for example, that maybe is on-prem versus cloud, and some of those data aspects, what are your thoughts on what a client needs to look for, on what questions they need to ask when it comes to those kinds of things?
So I want to start out by saying that even if it's a basic system where you can produce CECL numbers now with standardized models, and you can get numbers out, nothing is ever wasted. No implementation effort is ever wasted. We do see clients that now that they've gotten started and they have drawn the first sigh of relief that they made it on time, start to figure out that that they want to do more with their system, and they can get a little concerned if they can do that, if they can do this without scrapping what they already put in place. One of the things to look for if you are going to update, upgrade, expand your system, is definitely one that will leverage as much as of what you've done so far into a new system. So it's not about starting over, it's about building upon what you already have, to put processes around that, to automate it better, to move it together with other processes that you already have in place, and leverage that, what you can get out of the synergy of different things, or the efficiency of having your data in one place, the efficiency of having all of your output in one place, the efficiency of having all of your, say, models, both external and internal models, in the same place, and be able to switch this out and get more flexibility in what you're doing. So even if you started out with standardized models and out-of-box functionality, if you're now finding that for some of your data, for some of your credit risk, for some of your portfolios, that you want to use that you want to be using internal models, either because you have a high concentration there, or you do have a good handle on how these portfolios are working, that can all be leveraged with what you have. So you don't have to change everything at once, and you can upgrade even from where you're starting. Nothing is wasted.
Well, having that one system that's dynamic enough, training your resources as well, I think that is an obstacle that clients encounter, whether they choose to host the system themselves or hire someone else on to host it for them. But no matter what, training their people to whatever degree to use the system, being able to have that one system that is flexible enough to handle these different needs means that at whatever pace they are able to implement this system, this is the one system rather than having 10 disparate systems to handle all these different processes. From the budget perspective, that typically is over time, it helps. But then also just from time as well, you're not spending extra time training your people, whether they're new, bringing them on, or whether they've been with you for a while and they're getting used to this new system.
I think that you're bringing up another point. Sometimes what can happen is that in the eagerness and the deadline looming, that things get very implementation focused and very focused on the technical process or the technical infrastructure, the technological infrastructure. And especially where the teams that are conducting, the business teams that are conducting this kind of analysis, where they wear many hats, that the focus can be taken away from the business process itself. And very, very fundamental that you get a system that adapts to your business process instead of having your business process adapt to your system. Because if the business process has to adapt to the system, those are at least two new projects that you're embarking on. You're not only embarking on putting in new regulation and figuring out how that works and producing numbers out of that, but you're also throwing a completely new resource requirement on your team to be able to handhold and maintain a new system. So to the widest extent that a system can be adaptive and flexible to the business process that you have already in place, that's what you want to go for. And if accommodating your business process means that you have to free up your team's resources by having other outside people host and manage your system, that's absolutely a viable solution and often a very good one. The safety concerns and security concerns that has been about putting your data in the cloud has been resolved for a long time, and it can be perfectly safe for you to have your data in the cloud and having someone else maintain your system and host and manage your system for you.
Well, and especially there are some institutions that I've encountered that they don't always ask these questions on their own, and they don't necessarily always know what questions to ask, which is completely okay. And so finding those external resources, finding consultants who do know what questions to ask so that before that implementation even starts, they can ask those questions with you, and internally those conversations can be had. Those discussions between stakeholders can happen. Those decisions can be made. That is absolutely vital. Some institutions, and it's completely okay if they haven't, don't know what questions to ask. So bringing in an external resource like consultants who have the experience and know what questions to ask before the implementation even starts is important, because it makes for a smoother implementation. And so even though there are sometimes still changes through the implementation, being able to ask questions like, do we want on-prem versus cloud? What fits our needs based on our data, based on our budget and the speed at which we can do the implementation? How many resources do we have to put towards this? There are certain questions that should be asked, and ideally before the process, the implementation starts. And in combination with a system that is flexible enough to handle all of these things rather than simply the base CECL request, that's really important and vital to having a smooth risk management process that's going to be flexible enough to handle multiple analytics rather than one regulatory process.
And I think that can sometimes be, that can sometimes present a little bit of a hurdle if what you're looking at is a standard product that has less flexibility. It becomes more the exercise of how to squeeze your business or your institution into that. Then it becomes, is it meeting your needs and taking into account your specific business model and just a whole business way of doing business, your business process. So let me ask you this. Have you encountered clients that want to use their own models, even if they embarked with a system, started out with a system that had only standardized or external models?
Absolutely. And I would say that that is more so a common request now to be able to use a mix of their own models and standardized models as well. And so I have worked with a few clients actually where they have some standardized models and their system worked with the standardized models, but then it took some extra rework because their system couldn't necessarily accommodate their newer models. And so it did add significant implementation cost, time, resource usage. And so really, I think that speaks to being able to have a system that's flexible enough to be able to handle both standard as well as customized models. So, you know, if they want to swap their champion and their challenger models, they can, and it's not an onerous process. What's your experience with clients and their CECL systems handling data integration from multiple sources?
That's a good question. Data integration from many different sources is, of course, essential simply because like no one has one data source. And thinking that scaling your system to only be able to take one data source or a few data sources in is going to put so much of the effort of what you're doing outside of the system, where it's likely not automated, becomes a very fragmented process, and often also very manual or in need of hand-holding and not really in an automated, flexible way of doing this. And which again means that you're going to be spending a lot of time doing not what you're supposed to be doing. Better data integration, being able to handle many different sources and many different formats. You want to have a process that is automated as much as possible, and being able to handle many different data sources and integrate them into your system is one way of facilitating automation. So that's super, super important to start with. What is more common, do you think, that people are using the canned reporting or a reporting tool within the system, or that they leverage their own systems?
So I think really it varies on the institution and their bandwidth of their resources. So I've encountered clients that do one or the other. Really, it depends on the client. But a lot of our clients have their own BI. And so being able to have a system that can connect easily into what they already have is important, right? Because it's going to be a lot less work. It's going to be a lot less implementation, particularly, let's say one day we're looking at defaults, but maybe we want to look at prepayment or cures or charge-offs, and we want to dive deeper into them. Being able to more easily visualize and change those is important. And if those internal dashboards that they already have are not already built to easily change depending on what they want to look at, then that is something to keep in mind for institutions who do want to upgrade to a CECL system that can take on more. Can you talk a little bit, Ricky, about how important it is to be able to conduct scenario analysis and to be able to change those scenarios?
Oh, it's one of the great trifecta of the system like this. Like, you want to be able to switch out your data fairly easily and still have it run automatically. You want to be able to switch out your scenarios and upload new ones and be able to rerun over and over. And also, of course, with the right guardrails and validation, you want to be able to change your models at runtime. So you can get a fully flexible view at the end of what your loss drivers, where they're at, and what is most important, how that is contributing to your overall loss forecast and estimation. So definitely one of the three pillars that goes into a good system. What we see all too often is clients that have a set and, if you will, sequential process running where if you want to change even a small bit of it, or say, for example, the way that your metrics or your core analytics are calculated, or if you want to add to that, you have to change the whole process and sort of scrap it and start over. It's not easy to get to, and it's deeply embedded in a lot of other processes, and which is why you want something that is more modular. You want something that is more flexible. So if you do want to add to or change your core analytics, that is the only bit. That point in the process is the only thing you have to change, and it is sufficiently surfaced to you so you can go and change that little bit and see and get immediate results from that, and leverage anything that has happened in the process up until then. So the ability to do incremental and modular changes is key to maintain a system that can grow with you and that can adapt to when your business needs inevitably will change.
I think for the systems that are inflexible, that the systems that cannot accommodate those changes easily, and whether it's due to budget, time, a combination of both, and not being able to just create a whole new system, which is understandable. Most institutions do not have the time or resources to do so. There is significant work on the back end to be able to add on the analytics that they've discovered they need. And with that comes a lot of operational risk, typically because it's a lot of manual work, is what I found with my clients. And so that adds on another degree of difficulty in terms of traceability and accountability, but just risk in general to your whole risk management process.
We have a number of clients that are not only are not only under one kind of regulation, but could be have multiple locations, have presence in multiple markets that are governed by different kinds of regulations. So it's very common that we see that we have to accommodate like different risk-related types of the analysis. Not only CECL, but could also be international standards, could also be internal risk management, and to have a platform where all of that is in line with each other. So it's not like you have different separate systems that are relying on different input data, on different processes, and have vastly different output that is not reconciled in any way. But to be able to have that on one platform to if nothing else, have the same starting point in terms of data, and having be able to reuse data within the process, or just even be able to leverage different parts of the process, even if the analysis or the metric or the purpose of that analysis could be multi-purposed, or yeah, could be vastly different between them. But having them knowing that it is on one platform, and that is from the beginning it's reconciled and aligned, is very important for a good system.
We've worked on a client before with CECL and CCAR implemented together within the same system. So that's one example of how many institutions who both fall under that same, both of those umbrellas, are able to experience the benefits of having a system that's flexible enough to handle both.
The good news is that even if you want to switch systems, because you already have a process that is at least covering you to start with, the switching over in a system, or maybe perhaps a better way of saying it, upgrading your system to be more flexible, doesn't have to be neither on a burning platform or a big bang, or be dragged out into eternity, or stop you in your tracks while you're upgrading. Upgrading a process or switching into a better system can be done gradually. It can be done in a modular, prioritized way that is not disruptive to your business process at all. It can be done with your resources, and it can be done with, if you prefer, it can also be done with external resources, so you don't have to free up part of your team to do it. But it can happen slowly. It can happen in phases. So the most important, the bigger things are done in the beginning. Switching systems does not have to be a disruptive process. It can be done in an incremental manner. It can be done as you are conducting your business and have focus on that, and it can 100% leverage the process that you already have in place. So build on top of that rather than scrapping that and starting over. But that is much more common in the way that we work than it is to start from scratch.
To Ricky's point, there are many different ways to approach it. And so depending on a client's budgetary needs, timeline needs, we can have those conversations with them to determine how we need to approach it with them to figure it out. I have worked on a client before where we implemented the retail portfolios first completely, and we started training their people on the process. And then they implemented the wholesale portfolios. And we consulted as we went along, helping a little bit here and there with their implementation. And so, at least from the budget perspective, and from the resource perspective on the front end, we can handle that in different ways. So I think it is very much customized to the client, and we have those conversations with the client to make sure that the expectations are set and it fits their needs.